Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives. I'm your host, King, and this is our first show of the year, 2026. And I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Good to be back with you after a couple of weeks off at the end of the year and the beginning of the new year. Um, I'm coming in with my spiritual energy at a 10 out of 10. This morning, I did not have to necessarily choose that. That's really right where it is. So I hope I pass muster according to the King paradigm.
Well, I appreciate that consideration, but again, it's not my judgment of it. Is as you know, I know you're joking. It's your judgment, and I join you and I'm equal a 10 as well. And I choose it mainly because, again, I go through my gratitude list, which I'll segue into in a second, and I can never go through my gratitude list and feel anything less than a 10. You know, so with that being said, I'm grateful for being alive and healthy and sound of mind and spirit in 2026, another new year. I'm grateful for the ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. I'm aligned with my purpose, and I believe in the universal uh, law of abundance and health. I believe my health is great. I feel healthy, and for every cell in my body is vibrating wellness. I'm grateful to be able to continue to learn and grow as an individual. Um, I look at where I've been over the last couple of years and the growth I've experienced in 2025 and even subsequent years. You've been a big help in that and becoming more fully human. And now I really think as a fully human person, and I'll continue to grow that way instead of thinking as a black person trying to become fully human, which I believe I've been on that journey for years. But I now, my initial thoughts are looking at things through a fully human lens instead of the identity of my race lens or my category that was given to me lens of a construct that doesn't exist. So I'm grateful to be in this space. And then finally, I'm grateful to be here on the podcast with you, continue to build, and happy that you are alive and well and present.
Yeah, amen. So I'm grateful for my I hate to say typical, but it is typical. My everyday gratitude is that I get to live, and I've lived my entire life with indoor plumbing, safe drinking water, um, ample food. There was always a refrigerator when I was a kid with food in it. Not that I had free access to it when I was a kid. There were certain things I couldn't eat, and times of day when it was appropriate. But all kidding aside, my basic needs have been met. It's been pretty cold where I am this past month, and I have heat in a house. Um, so I'm grateful for that, and then I get up every day and do work that I care about, that I feel is really important. That's part of my unique ecological niche, to use Bill Plotkin's language. It's what the work I'm supposed to be doing in the world, and I've let go of all of the illusions or delusions, I guess, that I had when I was younger about being. Um, I was never really wanted to be rich and famous, but um, I just do the work now, and what comes of it comes of it. So there's nothing like experience to temper um, aspirations and goals, and not that they're not important, but to have increasingly more realistic views of them, um, as I gain more experience on this planet, also known as getting older.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that being said, why don't you walk us into our topic for today?
Yeah, so for 3.5 years, not 3.5, but yeah, about 3.5 years, we've been talking about uh, the collective national shadow of the United States. And when I'm not going to say a lot more about it. I'll just say a little bit more about it. What that means is those aspects of the nation, both historically and presently, that we deny about the country. And by we, I mean tens of millions of Americans, not every single American, but enough that the nation does have this collective denial. And as 2025 has not morphed, it's moved into 2026, the evidence of that shadow is increasingly more visible, more easily observed, and in fact, I would say more severe. Um, so I'm just going to, I want to lead with something that we didn't put in the show preview, but I just want to say it out loud and show it to people. And then we'll move into what was in the show preview, this idea that's been not new, but that's been bandied around by some conspiracy theorists and by some people who are more serious in the MAGA world, um, that China, Russia, and the United States are working together to slice the world up into three spheres of influence. China gets Asia, Russia gets Europe, United States gets the Western Hemisphere. And that, kind of seemed goofy when we first heard it, but things continue to, and I'm not saying that it's a conspiracy and it's going to happen or that it's real, but there are certain things that are happening, especially with the invasion of Venezuela and the taking of the president of that country and bringing him here to the United States, and the Trump administration making it really clear they want to take Venezuela's oil, and they're going to take Venezuela's oil. That there's some actions taking place that the United States, unlike what Trump said in 2016, that no more wars, we're not going to try to control the world, we're not the world's policemen, we're not going to try to be in control of everything, we're just going to make America great within our borders again. Now he wants Iceland, he wants Cuba, he wants Greenland, he wants Cuba, he wants Venezuela, he's talking about Colombia, and he's using the military, and he's putting us at the brink of some really dangerous things. So that's what we're going to talk about specifically. But as evidence of that kind of thinking and the lack of trustworthiness of this administration, 2 or 3 days ago, the Trump administration put a new page on the White House website regarding the January 6th. It might have been yesterday it actually appeared, because yesterday was the anniversary of January 6th. But regarding the January 6th attack on the Capitol, an attempt to overthrow the election on behalf of Donald Trump in 2020. And so I just want to share that page for a moment. So this is of concern, and this is on the United States of America White House website. This kind of stuff is of concern anywhere because it's provably false, right? But it begins with the date. It's all in black and white. It has if you put your cursor there, Nancy Pelosi is seen as the perpetrator, and then you see the members of the January 6th committee, including the two Republicans, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. And then it's a lot of text. Thousands of Americans paid the price for political failures they did not create. They're saying that on his first day back in office, President Trump issued sweeping blanket pardons for nearly 1,600 patriotic Americans prosecuted. These are the people who are responsible for damaging the Capitol, for threatening the vice president, for threatening all the members of Congress, for injuring some 140 law enforcement officers, and for killing one. And then it's just more and more. And they take Nancy Pelosi's words, who, as the Speaker of the House, said in a larger context, I take responsibility for the safety of the people of the Congress. She didn't say she takes responsibility for the attack on the Capitol. So it's really this frightening, for me, pre-1989, 1990, Eastern European and United Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR, propaganda, and it appears on the White House website now. This is the White House, the website that represents the President of the United States of America. So this stuff has been lied about for he lies about everything, but this is now on the White House website. So I'm going to take down the share unless you want me to keep it up there. Um, but it's pretty frightening.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my initial take on this is this: that, and I quote George Carlin, the late great comedian. He says, "America is not a republic. America is an oil company with an army." Right? And he said this way back in the early 2000s when he was still alive. And that's what we're experiencing. So to me, and one of the people I follow on YouTube was a influencer and a filmmaker and makes a lot of educational material now, historical reference material that talks about America from its time of creation to current. And basically, Matthew Cook, he talks about how Trump is not doing anything different than any other president has done, through the years. He cites, what we've done again in, you know, Nicaragua and things of that nature. But I want to say this in reference to Trump specifically and to what you posted on the website is that Trump knows that his base is slowly losing their frequency as far as just supporting him and endorsing him and always following him regardless of what he does. He's losing that mainly because of what's happening with Epstein, the Epstein files, uh, as well as you said before, when he promised to be America first and make that his focus, and now we're seeing that it's not his focus, and so he's starting to lose his base now because of that. People are starting to see that Trump is not following or holding truth to the things they voted for him to do, and so if he loses his base, and he's easy to get out of there, he's easy where you can just come at him and get him. So what he's doing now is like a rat trapped, and he's dangerous. He's extremely dangerous because he's one that White House post is directly for his base. It's to say, let me get you back in line with me. Let me get you back feeling the hate. Because again, the best way to keep his base energized is to give them hate or to attack any minority group, whether it can be, and attack immigrant groups as well. And that's always worked for him in the past. And that's what they're hoping to do now is always at the very end, be that champion, be that spokesman for folks who give them a voice of feeling that we're losing our country, and Trump is the person that's going to stand up for our rights and make sure that white culture and white identity is still the primary identity, and Christian values, white Christian values, are what is a culture of America. And so him being trapped makes him very dangerous, as we see right now, just going to Venezuela the way he did, uh, pretty much kidnapping the president and his wife and locking them up in a U.S. prison, and without having any just cause other than to say, well, he's he was not really a true elected official, and he's a dictator, even though he's in bed with Putin and everybody else who are dictators. So we know that's not his justification. You can't say he does drugs because we saw what he did. He's done with Honduras president, releasing him. So Trump has shown that he has no moral center. He has no integrity. And now his base is realizing that they've known that all along, but it benefited them. He fulfilled their agenda. He was their spokesman. He created a culture where now you can say things about blacks, other minority groups, gays, and bundle all that up in the woke. And that's how you can just talk about them now publicly and say things publicly and without being called racist. And now we are living in a world in which we see that his administration and Trump has shown that, unlike previous presidents who again did similar tactics for American supremacy and global dominance, they use words like liberation. We're going to free the people. We're going to make sure that there's equality and democracy installed in these countries. They use those coded words. Trump just takes the gloves off completely. You know, He's just going to tell you what, like he's telling you in Venezuela, I'm going for the oil. I'm not going to sit here and try to create the best words to use, even though on Fox News, his, as they call them, his sycophants are still trying to use those words. It's not about oil. It's about liberation. It's about freeing the people. Trump doesn't care about any of that. Trump is going to say what he feels. It's about the oil. We're going to put the oil companies there in America. I mean, to rebuild America, rebuild Venezuela, and then we're going to charge American people tax dollars to pay back the oil companies. And see, what Trump doesn't realize is that because he's had so much privilege, and because he's been able to do what he's been able to want to do his whole entire life, without really any kind of ramifications or consequence, that he has to understand that he has to stay in power. He has to play the political game, and he's not playing the political game, and that's what his base is realizing, and that's what the people who are sycophants are like. Trump, listen, you can't just say we're going for the oil, even though we're going for the oil. You can't just say that. You got to be a little more diplomatic. You got to be more political. You got to make sure you use the right words so that the American people and the media won't beat you up. Because again, to your point, what you've done now is you open the door up for China to take over Asia and Russia to take over Europe. So that's my initial take, is that Trump has been like a trapped rat, and now we're seeing him at his most dangerous. Like, I expect even more harm and violence and evil to come as a result of the more that he's in danger of losing his presidency or possibly even being arrested. I think we're going to see more of him being violently, his violent tactics are going to increase.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. Although there's one thing I would say with regard to the historian who says that Trump is doing, and I agree generally, with the whole imperialistic approach and the colonialist approach and taking over places from our inception. That's what we did. We took land from people in the Pacific, here in the North American continent. But the one thing that no other presidents have done that is different, and there's more than one thing, but the one thing that's really different is in the first 9 or 10 months, Trump and his administration, following the guidebook of Project 2025, dismantled much of the infrastructure of the federal government of the United States, and specifically those aspects of the infrastructure that over a period of almost 250 years, through constitutional amendments, through legislation, through protests, through demonstrations, through fighting for equal rights for all, which has yet to be realized, obviously, the primary dismantling were of those programs that had resulted from the progress that in fact was made. And even Reagan didn't do that. Republicans love to talk about the great communicator and all that, but the world got worse for poor people and black people under Reagan, and it got better for rich people. So the use of American wealth and power to go out there and bully people and take their land or their resources, yeah, it's been going on for centuries. But this particular move, the Doge move, if you want to call it that, that's new. And a lot of people are suffering because of that. People who were really hardworking federal employees who kept things running. And so anyway, I don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole, but more to the point of Venezuela. I mean, just last night or this morning, the United States Navy intercepted a tanker that was flying a Russian flag. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because whether or not it's a Russian-based tanker or I don't know the details yet, but Trump and his buddy Putin are going to have something to say to each other around that. But the larger picture of this three spheres of influence, one of the bullet points in this theory, and it may be a conspiracy theory, that surfaced more than a year ago, was that because Venezuela was able to survive under Maduro because of relationships with Iran, Cuba, Russia, and China. What Anne Applebaum wrote about in her book, Autocracy Inc. All these different autocrats, while they don't really have an organization together, they have a common enemy, which is liberal democracy, basically Europe, the United States, Australia. Or I should say North America, Europe, and Australia. They have this common enemy and they help each other financially, with arms, with different things. And part of this theory was that Russia would be willing to sacrifice its interest in Venezuela if the United States sacrificed its interest in Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. So two things are happening right now that feed right into that. Obviously, the years-long war of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and now the United States basically saying that we're going to run Venezuela. The people of Venezuela hated Maduro. Many of them are in the streets right now protesting what the United States did. So it's kind of like when we went in there after Saddam Hussein. Many Iraqis hated him, but they protested the United States bombing their country. So it's kind of like he was a bad guy, but he was our bad guy, and it's not your business. That's a gross oversimplification. I understand that. But Trump, in his, as you say, his inability to temper his language, because every clip you hear him say, he just says it's about the oil. He just repeats it over and over again. It's almost comical. In fact, God bless, Jon Stewart did a piece on Monday. They were trying to encourage him to talk about other things. He just kept on saying, it's about the oil. We're going to get the oil. So it's a scary time because Putin doesn't care if another million Russians die and if he gets what he wants. Trump doesn't really care about I use this word in quotation marks and with respect, the grunts in the American military, those who would actually do the fighting. He wants to hang out with Hegseth and the generals who Hegseth is bullying, but he doesn't really respect them. He's made that clear for decades. But he has the biggest gun on the block. Right? He has the biggest arsenal, and he can get away with a lot. So basically, I'm arguing that what the Trump administration has done is destroy or turn back decades and decades, over a century of progress, 2 centuries of progress that was gained through the lives of many people, protesters, military personnel, and the powers being once again consolidated in a small number of people. And I would say that God bless George Carlin, he didn't have the information yet to talk about the tech oligarchs. But basically, it's the United States is an oil and technological company with an army now, because there are more people besides just the oil companies. So it's a really dangerous time, and the scariest thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, is most of the people, and I would include you and me in this, but I think we're paying attention. But so far as of today, what Trump is doing hasn't directly impacted my life. In terms of my getting up in the morning, eating food, going to the bathroom, and doing my work, not directly affected, other than my anger about it, my research into it, my trying to show it to more and more people. But I'm not directly affected by it. And that's the danger of the complacency of being more or less comfortable as this administration puts the United States and the world at large in increasingly greater danger of war. And from a guy who doesn't really understand the ramifications of what he's doing because he's always been able to get away with whatever he's done his entire life. He doesn't have the wisdom of having been in the armed forces. He didn't bring what someone like Mark Milley or Colin Powell or George Herbert Walker Bush brought to the job. Um, and I'm comparing secretaries of state and presidents here, secretaries of defense, secretaries of state, and presidents. So it's a scary time, and uh, Americans, except for every now and then, every 2 or 3 months, we go out and we march in the streets, then we go back home. There's a real complacency around it because it doesn't directly impact us, and that's the us-centric view. Oh, I'm okay. It's not going to get any worse than this, and that's what Eastern Europe was like in the late 1930s. It's not going to be that bad. And it ended up in another world war and a Holocaust. So I'm not predicting a Holocaust. I'm predicting things getting worse.
Well, you say it hasn't directly affected you. Now, I would say it has affected me, impacted me. Over 320,000 Black women have been fired from the government. Um, and of that, my niece and my niece's mother are both who worked for the government for 20 years. My niece worked for the government for 6 years. They're both out of jobs. They don't. I mean, They're out from the government. They have jobs now because they have skills. So it's definitely his decisions that you say with the Doge, the difference that you pointed out earlier with Doge, what he's done here in America, definitely has impacted folks. But when I shouldn't say but, I want to say period, and that I look at it this way, that and our comments that we're getting here in the feed shows this, is that what is happening, and you talk about what happened in Europe to create the scenario that for the Holocaust, is that most people no longer are critical thinkers. They argue their opinion against facts. And then they feel that because they can get louder and insult, that makes them right, as opposed to looking at what's in the best interest of their own lives. Like I would like to ask people who support Trump and support MAGA, how have you personally benefited from what Trump has done and what MAGA has done? If you're not a billionaire, if you're not part of the billionaire class, I would love to hear how someone has personally benefited from what Trump's administration has done since he's been in office. All right. And I bet they can't do it. And if they can do it, they're going to articulate the fact that it's because others have suffered. So if you benefited because you enjoy watching others that you might not like or hate suffer because they're different than you, then that speaks volumes to who you are and your character. Right. And I've learned that for my own mental clarity, that I'm pulling myself back from most of these conversations around politics. Because I used to be in that rabbit hole that I would watch the political commentaries, even Jon Stewart. I mean, as entertaining as that was, and I watched that, and I said I'm not going to watch any more of it just because of the fact is, at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything for me but make me laugh. But then it feeds my YouTube algorithm with more political commentary, and everybody now is vying for more and more attention and creating more and more content to get you to click on, talking about how, again, there's a fight within MAGA of all these different MAGA YouTube influencers not liking each other, whether it's Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens, and how they're fighting with each other, and how Charlie Kirk's death created this void that everybody's trying to position themselves to be the next Charlie Kirk in that field. And at the end of the day, that's all it is a game. Everybody's just putting up content just to try to make money so they can get sponsors for their show so that they can now make themselves rich and not even think about the consequences that they're causing, and praying that they don't get killed in the interim. And I just feel that for my own mental clarity, I'm going to look at what I can do to be more fully human. My thing is, I'm going to focus on what it makes to be more in lines of how can I vibrate at the energy going with Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness love, the frequency of love at 500. How can I get to that, sustain that vibration? And I can't get to that vibration if I'm allowing myself to keep going down these political rabbit holes. Because, like I said, yeah, we can point out all the things that Trump's administration is doing currently as, again, invading Venezuela. And as you said before, you know, I saw in the comments someone mentioned about how Venezuelans are celebrating, and we should ask them. And that's their perspective. But then we see also Venezuelans are upset. Any country is going to be, any sovereign nation is going to be upset if another sovereign nation comes in and invades them and tries to solve their problems externally. Like, as much as we say we're not satisfied with the Trump administration, if another country came in and began to bomb the White House and kidnap Trump, there will not be an American alive that will support that. They will not cheer for that. They will say, "You've come in our country, now we got to have war." They wouldn't say, "Okay, Trump's gone. We celebrate the fact that Korea came over here and killed Trump, so now we're satisfied." No country will want any nation, any sovereign nation would want any other country coming into their territory and doing any kind of bombing. That's an act of war, plain and simple. But like I said, what I've also learned, and going back to quote Einstein, that the definition of insanity is to keep repeating the same actions and expecting a different result, right? And for me, and again, I'm not saying this against anybody else, but me personally, I'm learning that for me to continue to feed my mind the information from the media, where there is no correct media, there is no fair media, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, there's a few media sites that I like, Democracy Now, I like PBS, those that I will watch for information. But other than that, the major ones, CBS, MSNBC, Fox News, CNN now, we see that they're propagandists. They've been propagandists all along. I mean, just quickly, and I'm going to sum up my point by saying this, that you just watch, if you watch the sports, if you watch sports such as football, and again, this is football, now we're going to the playoffs, and you watch a game and you watch the commercials during the game, everything's about getting you to shop, getting you to buy alcohol, buy more food. And then you're watching late night shows on TV, and it's these, we allow drug manufacturers to sit here and peddle all their drugs to us. I saw this one for last night where it's I forgot what they're, something to do with your vision. If you're losing your vision, they're saying that there's this new drug that helps you deal with your vision that you inject into your eye. And it has this elderly woman talking about how she was losing her vision until she had this drug, and now she can ride with her daughter on the motorcycle. But then it says the side effects are you detached retina, possible heart attack, possible stroke, possible loss of eyesight. So who's willing to sit here and try to improve their eyesight by taking this drug and with all these potential side effects? But my point I'm making is that's what's flooding your mind when you're just trying to watch a game. These kind of advertisements, either buy more food or drink more beer, and the food and beer that you're drinking or alcohol is not conducive for your body. So if you get to be our age, you're going to start to see the side effects of all that beer and fast food eating as far as health is concerned. So then the answer is now take some of these drugs that these manufacturers are saying. So I'm thinking too, like I said, not only for my physical health, but my spiritual health and my mental health, is what can I do to stay and vibrate the frequency of 500 as much as possible? And it has to be controlling what I feed my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think that, I mean, even if you look at, I wasn't even paying attention to the comment stream until you mentioned it. I generally don't, because I mean, much of that is just trolling, and some of it, I'd say probably most of it, is people writing 5 or 6, maybe 10 words that you can't even tell what it means, and you can't tell if they're responding to us, to something you or I say, or just somebody else who's already made a comment. So for me, it's never, those comments are never useful or meaningful in any way. So I tried to look at a couple of them, and then there's two in particular who just were you know nonstop. Like, I don't know how they do it that quickly, if they're actually human or not. But it's a meaningless gibberish. And one guy said, I have the facts on my side. Okay, well, that's helpful in a conversation to say that. Doesn't mean anything. So, to your point, though, about critical thinking, I mean, critical thought both allows and, I would argue, requires us to be precise in our language, to be open to being corrected when we make a mistake, and to really caring about what Václav Havel referred to, living in truth, committing oneself to the truth. And I don't want to, say that the comment stream is a monolith that everybody's the same, because they're not. But in fact, there's little, if any, evidence in that comment stream of people really looking to commit to the truth and get to the heart of any matter. It's just one-off, not even complete thoughts thrown at us. And that is typical. I'm not going to say just in the U.S., but definitely in the U.S. And a big part of it, comes from the dominance of people living with this kind of a thing and living their lives, basically scrolling and trolling, and meaningful discourse, complete thoughts, complete sentences, and God forbid, a complete paragraph that actually has a beginning, a middle, and end and makes sense, even if I disagree with it. Those become increasingly fewer and further between. Last thing I'll say is I just came upon this morning. Back in 96. I forget the exact year, but Carl Sagan put out a book. I'm going to lose the name of it, but he basically predicted the world we're living in. I mean, he said, if things don't change, I have a foreboding feeling, and I'm not going to try to quote it because I don't have it in front of me now. I'm not going to go looking for it, but with great accuracy. I mean, he couldn't name names, obviously, but basic trajectories and contexts. He spoke to what America is like in 2026, and he did it 31 years ago. So I guess that would have been 96 or so. So check my math on that. So it's scary times. There are some really smart people who really can see what's going on. And what you said about the news organizations, I generally agree with the biases, but even Democracy Now! Is biased to the left. I think it's really important, and I know you do this, so I'm not correcting you in any way, but to differentiate actual journalism, when people go out, see what's going on, and report on the news, and either do an audio report, or audio video report, or write a report, which appears then in a newspaper or magazine, versus those who comment on the reporting on the news. Increasingly more people, it seems to me, confuse reporting, real journalists, with people who are commenting on the news. Right? So that's a really dangerous thing, because I can comment on anything. I'm not a journalist, but I read and listen to real journalists and historians who have dedicated their lives to seeking the truth in various disciplines. And that's different from the scrolling and trolling that social media, especially on a phone, which is omnipresent, offers. It's not a real version of the world. And I say that knowing very well that what we're talking about right now will appear on some people's social media feeds. Um, but I'll hold up what I have to say in a debate with anyone because it's based on research and a history that includes actual historical events from historians, research from developmental psychologists, um, politics, spirituality, and my own direct experience, as opposed to just scrolling through and making some random comments about somebody else's conversation. It's what they called decades ago the dumbing down of America. And actually, that meant something very different when it was originally said, but it's effectively the same thing, where we're not a particularly well informed nation. We're the most monolingual nation among most of the nations on the planet. Almost everyone in China and in European countries that don't speak English as a primary language speak English, at least English. Most of the people I know in Europe are trilingual or more. And I'm guilty of that. I mean, I have some Spanish, but I really am not conversant in Spanish. So we just want to be comfortable and make money and succeed in the material world, and that's the underlying fault. I've said this in writing, and I'll say it again. The underlying fault of America, and I'm glad I live here, and this country has done a lot of good for a lot of people and has made progress. People who say what progress are not looking with clear eyes. I'm not saying they've resolved anything. Women are still discriminated against. Blacks are still discriminated against. Native Americans have all but been disappeared. I'm not saying that I'm not speaking about progress in the absence of knowing those things. But if you look at the United States in 1863 and you compare what it was like in 1963, much progress was made. It's being regressed now. It's been taken away. But the underlying theme that is at the heart of the worst of this country is that the primary culture, the power forces in our society value money, things, and beliefs more than they value humans and other living beings. Money, material objects, and beliefs are more important than human life and other life, period. That's the underlying fault. And the evidence of that is everywhere.
Well, I got to push back on a couple of things. I disagree that Democracy Now! Is biased toward the left. I think that MSNBC, CNN, you can say that those definitely are biased toward the left. But Democracy Now!, when Obama was in office, they didn't hold back their criticism of Obama. They reported journalism, as you said. They showed again, America's imperialism with Obama killing Gaddafi, justifying that there was a reason to kill Gaddafi, and that was a Democratic administration. And Democracy Now! Reported that. They didn't hold back on that. They criticized that. They brought on experts and reported about what was the cause of that and what now is going to be the impact of that. And I only wanted to make that point because I think that Democracy Now! Is really a good news source. I think that, of course, MSNBC and CNN, I think that they built Trump when he was running for office in 2016. So now they want to try to talk about Trump and critique Trump. I mean, MSNBC fired all the black journalists or commentators, analysts, whatever you want to call them. They got rid of most of them. So, I don't look at them as being any kind of they're feeding the left just as Fox is feeding the right. To me, they're in the same bed. You can say Fox lies more, but so does MSNBC if you want to look at certain things from a perspective. Because at the end of the day, and this is why I pose this question to all our viewers and everyone else out there, the content that you're consuming, what is it doing for you personally? Does it make you better in your day? Does it make you a better human being? Does it make you more loving and kind as a person to your family? Does it make you a better father or a better mother or a better son or a better boss? And if it's not, then again, what's the objective? Why are you consuming that information? Um, the days of, and again, I want to push back a little bit what you said about American progressive. So again, I think that's relative. That's like beauty. I think it's a relative statement when you say America's progress, because here's what I say that hasn't progressed. You know that America can sit here, and Trump administration now is doing this even more so. They're designating certain groups as terrorist groups based off the political speech they have. But the KKK has never been designated as a terrorist group, ever. And they've been a terrorist group since day one. They were created for the purpose of terrorizing. They have terrorizing in their culture and their name and their brand, so to speak. But yet and still, they don't get designated as a terrorist group at all. And so for me, that hasn't changed. They have, again, white militias out there by the dozens. If any black group were to come along and say, we're going to go get arms, we're going to arm ourselves, we're going to live in the mountains, and we're going to just get off the grid, America would not they wouldn't have done it in 1850, and they wouldn't do it in 2026. Let those blacks up in their mountain with their guns, living their life off the grid, not bothering anyone. They won't let them exist. They wouldn't. That hasn't changed. So there are certain things in America, obviously, that has changed. Technology, I believe, has leveled the playing field more than anything else that has ever happened in America, where you and I can now put our voices in our videos, and anyone now can create content and make money and build a business if their mind is focused. So I think America's changed in that context, and the world has changed in that context. But, and I would even say this, I'll be willing, like Trump was saying that he's willing to let people who have millions of dollars, you can buy a U.S. citizenship, his gold card for like $5 million and get a U.S. citizenship. I would sell my U.S. citizenship for $5 million in a heartbeat. I would do that and leave America in an instant. And it's not about me not appreciating what America has done. It's just that what value? I've lived in America my entire life, and I've been able to travel overseas, and I've seen where you can have a better life if you want to be a human being. Like when I was in Colombia for a month, Colombia, South America for a month, and off the grid. And I was over there in the fresh mountain air, eating organic food. And for my mental well-being and my spiritual well-being, I wasn't listening to any news, whether it was Democracy Now, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, that I was following here, caught up in that news cycle and the algorithms telling me what's important and what I should watch. I was totally able to just tie into the land, tie into myself, and bond with the human beings that were there. And they were having to be black, white, male, female. None of that mattered. We was all human beings there, vibrating at a higher frequency and enjoying each other's space without feeling that because of, we're told that because based on our race, based on our sexual orientation, based on our religious affiliation or our religious dogma, our cultural, that we're different. And because we're different, we should not like each other. We didn't have that bias there. And that was a wonderful experience. I don't get that in America. Race is an albatross that's on your neck here in America. And it's been since I've been able to see what race is and able to articulate it. It's been there. Like I said, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, raised in St. Louis, Missouri till I was 18. And I only drove for 2 years from 16 to 18 that I had my license. I was pulled over more than 200 sometimes. I can't even count how many times I was pulled over by the police. Everybody I knew in my high school, friends, anyone that was in my age group, we all had warrants for our arrest. Not warrants because we were doing criminal activities and we did any kind of crime. warrants for traffic violations because they had those police. Uh, and St. Louis is broken down into municipalities, and every municipality, when you drove through it, was trying to raise revenue, and they raised revenue by setting up speed traps, and so people were getting these tickets, and it's a known fact. And to this day, you don't. If me and three of my black friends, male, could not ride in the car together in certain neighborhoods in St. Louis without getting put over by the police. We're going to expect that. And so now, because of that, we got to navigate. We can't say we got to take two cars. We got to take three cars. We all can't get in the car together and just enjoy each other's time. No, because the system doesn't allow that. And to me, that hasn't changed in America. It hasn't. That hasn't improved in the Obama's administration, under Biden's administration, under Trump's administration. So, regardless of who's in political office, those things are still there, and what Trump has done is take away the niceness of it. He's taken away the we're going to pretend to be kind. It's no, we're going to pretend to be real. We don't celebrate your history. You don't matter to us. You're not humans. We're taking away your history, and I'd rather have that and be real than to have Obama get elected and everyone think that okay, because Obama's in office, we're now in a post-race world where we never were. I mean, Obama was giving his State of Union address, and people, Marjorie Taylor Greene, others would stand up and say, "Well, I don't think she was in office." There's another woman, I believe, that stood up and told him he lies. You're lying, right through his inaugural. I mean, through his speech. Whereas no one has ever done it to Trump, and everyone knows he lies. No one has ever disrespected him enough through any of his press conferences, things that he says, called him a lie. They might fact check him after that. You know, we see that whole list of, okay, let's fact check Trump, but he doesn't get confronted with that at all while he's presenting it all. So Trump has shown me that he takes white supremacists to the fullest extent of, I'm going to show what it looks like to be white and male and rich. And I get away with it. I want to get away with, and all we can do is talk about it. We can just hope about it. We can debate it, but he's not going to go to jail. We know that for a fact. At best, we can hope is that he passes away. The next person to be put in office, hopefully, won't be as bad as Trump as far as being crude and crass, but they're still going to uphold the same level of supremacy and control that this country was built on. And then finally, like I said, just the logic of still believing that we're going to let ourselves be governed by a document that was written over 200 years ago by one class of men, where then we say we're a melting pot. That to me is illogical on every level. And then we also see, and my concluding point to this is that the folks who fight and talk about the Second Amendment and the Constitution and claim that it's so important to them, how when it really comes down to it, they don't believe in the Constitution. They only believe in it when it fits their agenda. If it doesn't fit their agenda, the other amendments, the 14th Amendment, all these other amendments, like I saw in one of the comments, Trump 2028. Well, that's clear in the Constitution that you're going to be in the office for 2 terms. So again, we see that what people have advocated for years, and that's why I say to a certain extent, I'm kind of happy that Trump did win, because it's like having a house and you live in a house and you have carpet covering your entire floor, and you hear underneath these noises and you see the carpet moving and you just look at it and you just ignore it. What Trump did was pull up the carpet and we see what's underneath the carpet. The roaches, the vermin, all that. He exposed that. So now we really see what it is instead of covering it up and pretending that it didn't exist. He shows the hypocrisy of America. And again, unless we really want to change America's culture, which it never really has been changed, because we still see Native Americans to this day who still get their land violated and taken, and still can get taken to this day if the government so inclined for business purposes. And then all we do is just talk about it and report about it and then it just goes away in another news cycle. But those people who were impacted, their family, their lives are destroyed forever. So for me, like I said, I'm kind of fed up with uh, choosing to be tied to one country, and there is no pride in being American at all in my eyes. I'm a human being. I'm worldly and how I view the world, and I detest any form of inhumanity and injustice done to anybody around the world, and that's kind of the space that I'm operating in.
Yeah, that last piece I'm 100% on board with. I think you know that. The pushback part. Like, so I didn't say that Democracy Now! Is not a valid source of news. What I said was that if you were to analyze from far right, center left, and far left media, and just look at the stories they cover. And again, I think that they do a good job, but they're center left. They're not far left. They're definitely not center right. They're not smack in the middle. That's all I was saying. I think they're a very valid source of news. With regard to the lack of progress, though, um, you basically agreed with me. Yeah. Other, you say that there's not been any progress. You said, well, there was a little bit here or there, but I basically said we still have a long way to go for women to be equal, for blacks to be equal, and Native Americans forget about. They're just almost gone as a people. So I think we generally agree there, but I'll still go back to say that there are more people in this country today who would agree with how you just ended what you said. It's about vibrating on a higher level, about not seeing, not that we don't see color, because that's bullshit anyway, but not interacting as a black or a white or a man or a woman or a gay or a straight, but one human being to another. There are far more people who live that way and want it to be more that way than there were in any other time in this country. There's no, without exception. We can look at photographs.
That part I do agree with. You're right.
So there has been progress, but and I don't say that in a way. So we're great. We've fixed everything. No way. I mean, you read my book. I mean, obviously, it's a horror show.
Right.
But we have to be able to honor both of those truths at the same time. The good faith people, the people who get up every day and go to work and raise their kids if they have them, or and treat people well. There are more of them in this country. They're essentially powerless in many ways than there are the other people. And if you look up but I agree with you 100%. The United States Constitution is held as sacred scripture by people, and it was written by men 200 some odd years ago. I've got it as 230 some odd years ago, because it was not as old as the Declaration of Independence, and it needs to be amended or rewritten. We need a constitutional convention, because it's no longer, big chunks of it are no longer relevant to the world we live in. And the people who hold on to it as though it's biblical, even the Bible is not based in anything factual. There's some cool lessons in it and some good teachings, but it's not history. If we don't amend the Constitution, the country is going to fail. If we keep things as it is. The Constitution is screaming for amendment. And there are people who basically, it's the white supremacist power structure that wants to keep it the way it is, because it was written by white heterosexual landowning men.
But let's be clear about it. They want to keep certain parts of it the way it is. Other parts they want to change, obviously, because they'd be more than happy for Trump to win in 2028, and that'll be changing the Constitution.
Yeah, and they'd like to dissolve aspects of the 14th Amendment. I agree with you there. So I think
and the First Amendment. they want to play with that. It's freedom of speech, but watch what you say. Right? We can't even criticize Israel in this country, but we can criticize America. I can talk about America all day long. Yeah, I get a lot of people who hate me, but it's not against the law. I won't get locked up. I won't get it. I won't get. It's funny how I won't get um, kicked out of my own country. We're talking about America, but if I talk about Israel enough, I may actually get deported for some reason, to another country in a prison. So that's the irony of that. But yeah, we've reached the top of the hour. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So let me clear up this by saying this, that people have changed. The I believe that most people in America are not racist, and most people in America want a better life for everybody. I believe the few who do are controlling people by telling them that the reason that they're not happy with their lives is the others. And
Mm.
because they're not critically thinking and they see themselves as victims, it's easier to see other people as being, your problems being external immigrants. Like I tell folks here, I live in Washington D.C. area, coming from St. Louis. This culture was a culture shock. I mean, coming from St. Louis is predominantly, or at least was when I left St. Louis. I don't know now. It was black and white. You
Mm.
didn't see too many other races or people outside of it. And coming to the Washington D.C. area, I saw it was a culture shock. People from all around the world. You had to learn different languages and different cultures. And so my point I'm making is, but I learned that, and at first I didn't like it. I'll be honest. It was a change, and of course, anything that when you're not a critical thinker, you don't see growth as being important. Any change is looked at as being bad.
Mm.
But as I grew and I realized that there was something to learn from this immigrant population, the way they treated their families, the way they respected their elders. Like when I watch Italian movies, your culture, I, I love how the elders are respected in your culture. And even though there's mobs and violence always through the movies, that the father of the family or the don of the family was always someone that was an elder, and everybody respected that elder in that context. I love that. You can love certain things you learn from immigrant populations, but you only learn that when you allow yourself to be growth minded and get away from the narcissist believing of your own identity and in that space. So that's my final session. So as we shift into kind of wrapping up our show for today, uh, take us away, give us some good advice on how we can become more fully human and navigate these waters that we deal in currently.
Yeah. So, I mean, we covered a lot of ground today, so it's going to be really tough to tailor something specifically. But I'm going to just say this again, that to go back to Václav Havel's teaching and proclamation about living in the truth and really committing to that. That don't waste your time making 6 to 12 word comments on social media, thinking you're debating or doing something worthwhile and moving the conversation forward. And that's not just directed at the trolling that we received today. It includes that, but it's a waste of a human life. You get a human life, and you're going to spend your life like this, like that. I mean, I'm not saying don't use your phone. Sometimes it can be useful. It's kind of a cool machine in certain ways, but really, get out of your bubble and really seek what is true. And that's hard work sometimes, especially when the power structures are offering you things that are not true. But it's up to you. You can live a life, mired in falsity and beliefs that simply are not valid, or you can do the work of getting to the truth. And doing that work of getting to the truth, as difficult as it is invaluable, for peace of mind, for health. When you're living a lie, well, there's a great line. It's a Willie Nelson song. When you're living a lie, it'll eat you inside. Nobody slides, my friend. That just came to me. God bless Willie. So yeah, don't live lies.
All right, appreciate that, absolutely. And now we move into the final segment of our show, which we want to highlight and give flowers to folks who are living a fully human lifestyle, either in the past or currently. And the person I want to highlight right now, I want to give my flowers to you. I've done that before in the past, but I want to do it again because you chose to write the books that you've written. Healing America's Narratives, investing your life and your time and into research and being a critical thinker, and not just talking on YouTube or other social media comment chats about your opinions, but you take it to the point where you want to be factual in what your thoughts are. You take pride in bringing knowledge and facts, and more importantly, you see, and I've always felt as you see me as a friend, as a brother. You've been kind, and you are. I believe you project it to everybody you deal with. And so, I mean, the purpose of our show is based off your teachings and what I've learned and what I've grown by being associated and knowing you. So, I want to give you your flowers as being a fully human person. I want to lift up in 2026.
Wow, thank you. Now I don't take compliments well. I don't know what to say. I'm seriously, I appreciate that. All joking aside, so thank you, King. So I'm going to avoid the temptation to just go right back at you with that because I had somebody in mind already coming on today. But I think I may have mentioned him in the past, and maybe even recently. But I've spent, I'm not quite through it yet, but during my workouts and occasionally when I'm cooking food or whatever and preparing for a meal, I've been listening and or watching Jack Smith's deposition in front of the House Judiciary Committee. A deposition that he wanted to make publicly in a public hearing so we could watch it live. But Jim Jordan, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee and a MAGA Republican guy, wanted it behind closed doors. And for some reason, they decided to release it. Parts of it have been redacted, but there's 8 hours and 21 minutes with a couple of breaks where there's just silence because they have a off-the-record conversation. But I'm about 6 hours into that. And when I think about living in a liberal democracy, the best manifestation of that, the more perfect union that the best of the founders wrote about, to work towards a more perfect union. They know, if you know the history of the Constitution, they knew that what they finally ratified was far from perfect. They knew the compromises they had entered into. They knew that stuff. But when I think about living in a country where there's a rule of law, that's one of the foundations. And we have an imperfect rule of law, but we do have a rule of law. If I needed to have something happen to a member of my family, a crime was committed against somebody in my family, I want the prosecutor to be somebody like Jack Smith. And if I ever committed a crime and I was a defendant, I don't want the prosecutor to be someone like that. I mean, his level of integrity and his calm and his understanding what the deposition was about, whether it was the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee or the Republican members. The Republican members had nothing to ask him. They were asking silly questions, and he patiently answered every one. He kept on referring to his final report. He said, I don't have an immediate memory of my answer to that question, but I would stand by whatever's in the final report. And when they were trying to, the Republicans wouldn't ask him didn't say anything about the insurrection, the attacks on the Capitol, the police officer who died, the 140 law enforcement officers who were injured. They never brought any of that up. They wanted to talk about Cassidy Hutchinson and people who came forward and testified in front of the January 6th committee. And he was up to calm, informed, competent manner. He was up to every question. He never had a hem and haw. When he didn't know the answer to a question, he said, I know that there's an answer to that, but I don't have it immediately available. But the best of what's possible in a liberal democracy under the rule of law, I believe that Jack Smith exemplifies that. So he's the person I want to make a deep bow to today. And I highly recommend people listening to the deposition. There's no big revelations or anything. It's just they drag him through all these questions. The Democrats had an agenda, the Republicans had an agenda, and he just came in and told the truth. It was just a pleasure to listen to him.
And I agree with you in the context that Jack Smith put his life at risk do what he's doing, and he's still putting his life at risk. So, the commenters, they can hate on him as much as you want, but until you do something like that, then shut up.
Yeah. Well, that you said that, there's one line when they were talking about witness intimidation. That Trump basically tried to intimidate various people and threaten them, and those members of and Smith praised the members of Trump's circle who came to, were subpoenaed and had to testify under oath for his investigation. And he praised them, basically saying they put themselves at great risk telling the truth, and they were ones who didn't tell the truth. And one of the members of the Judiciary Committee, I forget if it was a Republican or a Democrat, I don't really remember, but basically said, were there attempts or threats made against you? He said, yeah, on a regular basis. And then they said, were there attempts to intimidate you? And he basically said, I won't be intimidated. And he didn't say it like bragging, like a macho thing. He basically said it as a statement of fact. I won't be intimidated. That's not who I am and what I do. It was a really telling moment, because a lot of people can say that. I can say, you can't intimidate me. And he just said, I won't be intimidated.
And he knows. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I say I agree with you. I respect that, because he knows what can come from Trump's wrath, right? Whether it's legal or not, whether it's justified or not. And he knows what he's putting at risk, himself, his family. I'm sure he gets thousands of, he can't go online and build him a little podcast, because he's going to get threatened online as much as possible. So to me, if that's who you are, you want to threaten people online, you're a coward. And Jack Smith, like you said, fully human. So I accept that, and I celebrate him as well. So as we wrap up our show today, again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining us today on the Healing America's Narratives podcast. Until next week, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, that's all work continuing to be more fully human. Thank you.